There's a strange kind of silence that happens right before your life changes. Not the peaceful kind. Not the quiet you feel on a calm morning. The other kind. The kind where the air feels heavy, where every sound seems slightly too loud, and where something inside you whispers that nothing will ever be the same again. That morning, I was standing at the entrance of a beautiful lakeside garden. White roses climbed along the wooden archway. Soft music drifted through the trees. Rows of delicate chairs had been arranged beneath tall maple branches that filtered sunlight into warm golden patterns. It looked exactly the way I had imagined, exactly the way I had planned, exactly the way I had dreamed about for an entire year. And yet, I stood there like a stranger, because the sign at the entrance didn't say my name. It said, "Wedding of Madison Carter and Daniel Hayes." Madison, my little sister. For a moment I thought maybe it was a mistake, some mix-up with another event. Maybe the venue staff had accidentally switched the sign. But then the guests started arriving. People I recognized, my aunt waving to relatives near the entrance, my cousin adjusting flowers on a reception table, even the photographer I had personally hired months ago. Everyone moving around like this day had always belonged to someone else. No one looked surprised to see the name Madison on the sign. No one looked confused. Except me. A breeze moved across the lake behind the garden, carrying the faint scent of water and fresh flowers. And somewhere deeper inside the venue, someone laughed. A familiar laugh. Madison's. That was when my chest tightened. Not with anger. Not yet. With something stranger. Something hollow. Like watching your own life being quietly handed to someone else. While everyone around you pretends it's normal, I slowly stepped forward along the stone path. Each step felt unreal, like walking through a memory that hadn't happened yet. Near the entrance to the garden aisle, my mother suddenly appeared. She looked surprised to see me. Not shocked, not alarmed, just surprised. As if I had shown up to the wrong party. "Emily," she said softly. Then she quickly walked over and gently took my arm. "Come here for a second." She guided me away from the entrance, toward a quiet corner near the hedges where the music sounded distant. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Sweetheart, this isn't the time for a scene." I blinked. "A scene," she sighed softly. The way someone sighs when they think they're explaining something obvious. Madison really needed this day. I didn't answer. She continued gently, like she was explaining a simple family compromise. "You know how things have been for her. She's been under so much pressure. And Daniel's family already flew in from 3 different states." She squeezed my arm. "You have such a good life already. Emily, you have your career. You have Mark. You always land on your feet." Then she smiled in that calm, reassuring way mothers sometimes use when they believe they're being fair. "But Madison, she needs this more than you do." For a moment, the world seemed very quiet. I looked past my mother toward the garden. Guests were settling into their seats. A group of bridesmaids were laughing near the fountain. And standing at the far end of the aisle was Madison, my sister. She was wearing a white dress, not exactly the one I had chosen, but close, very close. She was smiling, the kind of bright smile people wear on the happiest day of their lives. She hadn't seen me yet, or maybe she had. It was hard to tell. In my hands, I was still holding the folder I had carried with me that morning. Inside it was a simple document, a thick stack of papers printed on ivory contract paper. The agreement for this venue, the one I had signed 11 months ago. Every detail of the garden wedding, every payment, every clause, every responsibility. A contract I had read carefully, very carefully, because that's what I do. I'm an event planner. Reading contracts is part of my job. And while everyone else in my family had spent the last few weeks arguing about flowers, music, and seating charts, I had been the only person who actually read the fine print. My mother looked back toward the garden, then back at me. "Emily," she said quietly, "please don't make this harder than it has to be." I slowly exhaled, then I nodded. Not angrily, not dramatically, just calmly. Okay. She blinked, clearly relieved. Okay. I looked once more toward Madison, toward the aisle that had been planned for me, toward the chairs I had personally arranged during the venue walkthrough. Then I looked back at my mother and said gently, "If Madison wants this venue," I paused, "she can have it." For a second, my mother seemed confused by how easily I said it, but relief quickly replaced the confusion. "Oh, good," she said softly. "I knew you'd understand." Understand. That word echoed strangely in my head. I turned and began walking back down the stone path toward the exit. Behind me, the music swelled slightly as someone adjusted the speakers. Guests continued chatting. Glassware clinked. Laughter floated through the garden. The wedding was beginning, and no one tried to stop me from leaving. Halfway down the path, I stopped, not because I had changed my mind, because I remembered something. I slowly opened the folder in my hands. The contract papers rustled softly in the breeze. My eyes drifted to a section near the bottom of page 12, a section written in small, careful legal language, a clause most people would probably skip, but not me. I closed the folder again. Then I looked back one last time toward the garden, toward the wedding that was no longer mine, and for the first time that morning, I smiled. Not a bitter smile, not a cruel one, just a quiet, knowing smile, because Madison had taken the venue. She had taken the decorations, the guests, the photographer, the aisle, the day, and that was fine. She could keep all of it. I truly didn't mind. But there was one small detail my sister didn't know. One detail hidden inside that contract. A detail that wouldn't matter today, or even tomorrow. But eventually, it would matter a lot. Because if Madison wanted this wedding venue so badly, I was more than happy to let her keep it, along with everything that came with it. If you asked my family to describe me, they would probably all use the same word. Responsible. It sounds like a compliment. But sometimes, responsibility isn't praise. Sometimes it's just another word for being the one who always gives in. That had been my role for as long as I could remember. I was the older sister, the one who fixed things, the one who understood, and the one who never made life difficult for anyone else. My name is Emily Carter. And for most of my life, people believed they could depend on me. What they didn't realize was that depending on someone and taking advantage of them can start to look the same after enough years. I work as an event planner, small weddings, corporate dinners, charity galas. When engagement, Peries, nothing glamorous, but enough to make a living doing something I genuinely enjoy. My job is basically organized chaos. People come to me when everything feels overwhelming. They want the perfect evening, the perfect moment, the perfect memory, and my job is to quietly solve problems before anyone even realizes they existed. The cake arrives late. I find another bakery. A band cancels, I have 3 backups on call. Rain ruins an outdoor ceremony. I move everything inside before the guests notice. It's a strange profession. You work for months, so that people remember only a few hours. But I love it. There's something comforting about creating order out of chaos. Maybe that's why the work fits me so well, because I've been solving other people's problems since I was 17. In my family, there's a rule no one ever says out loud, but everyone follows it. The rule is simple. Emily will understand. If someone forgets something important, Emily will fix it. If someone makes a bad decision, Emily will smooth it over. If someone hurts Emily herself, Emily will understand. And for most of my life, I did. Madison, my younger sister, was only 3 years younger than me. But growing up, those 3 years might as well have been an entire lifetime. Madison was always bright, always charming, always the center of attention. Teachers loved her. Friends adored her. Strangers remembered her name. Where I was steady and practical, Madison was the spark in the room. People naturally protected that kind of energy, including our parents, especially our mother. Madison didn't mean to rely on people so much. At least, that's what I used to believe. But when someone spends their whole life being rescued, They start expecting the rescue, and I was always the one who showed up. When Madison forgot a school project in middle school, I stayed up until 2 in the morning helping her rebuild it. When she failed her first college class, I helped her write the appeal letter. When she overspent her rent money after graduation, I quietly covered the difference. It wasn't dramatic. There were no arguments, just small moments where someone looked at me and said, "Emily, could you help?" And I did, because that's what older sisters do. At least, that's what I told myself. Then, 3 years ago, I met Mark. We met in the most ordinary way imaginable. At a coffee shop, I was working on seating charts for a charity dinner. He accidentally spilled half his latte across my paperwork. It was the kind of disaster that would normally ruin a morning, but he looked so horrified that I ended up laughing. "Don't worry," I told him. "I deal with worse disasters than coffee." He helped me clean up the mess, and we ended up talking for nearly an hour. Mark works as an architect, quiet, observant, the kind of person who listens carefully before he speaks, which meant he noticed things most people didn't, like the way I automatically apologized for things that weren't my fault, or the way I always checked my phone when my family called, like I was waiting for a problem to solve. One evening, about 6 months into our relationship, he asked me a simple question. "Emily, when was the last time someone took care of you?" I didn't know how to answer, because the truth was, I couldn't remember. Mark proposed on a calm autumn evening. Nothing elaborate, no grand gestures, just a quiet walk along the lake near our apartment. The water was perfectly still that night, the trees reflecting on the surface like a painting. He stopped near the dock and pulled a small ring box from his coat. "Emily," he said, a little nervously, "I don't want a perfect life. I just want one where we take care of each other." Then he knelt down and opened the ring box, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like something in my life was mine. Not borrowed, not shared, not sacrificed, just mine. Of course I said yes, because I work in events. Planning our wedding felt natural, almost comforting. Mark and I chose a small garden venue just outside the city, a historic lakeside estate with tall maple trees and winding stone paths. The moment I saw it, I knew, this is it. I told Mark. He smiled. "Then that's where we'll get married." The garden had a quiet elegance, not extravagant, but timeless, the kind of place where sunlight filters through leaves and turns the air golden. I spent nearly a year planning every detail. Soft white flowers, string lights across the trees, a small wooden archway beside the lake. Nothing overwhelming, just beautiful, just peaceful, just ours. When I first told my family about the venue, they were excited, or at least, they seemed excited. Madison, especially. "Oh my God," she said when she saw the photos. "Emily, it looks like something out of a movie." Mom nodded approvingly. "It's lovely." And for a while, everything felt normal. Family dinners, wedding discussions, occasional teasing about the guest list. It almost felt like everyone was genuinely happy for me. But sometimes, small comments would slip through. Little things, the kind of comments people make when they think they're being harmless. Emily's always been so lucky. Everything always works out for her. Madison said that once while scrolling through pictures of the venue, she said it lightly, but something in her voice sounded different, like admiration mixed with something harder to name. Even then, I never imagined what would happen, because my entire life had been built around a simple belief, a belief I had carried since childhood. If I kept being patient, if I kept helping everyone else, eventually things would balance out. Eventually my family would see me. Eventually my turn would come. So when Madison admired the venue, when she joked about how beautiful the wedding would be, when she asked 100 questions about the garden and the decorations, I didn't think twice. Why would I? She was my sister, and family helps each other. That's what I believed. What I didn't realize was that Madison had been thinking about that venue a lot more than I had noticed, and by the time I understood what she was planning, it was already too late, because the next phone call I received from the venue would change everything, and it would begin with a sentence I never expected to hear. "Hello, Emily," the venue manager said politely. "We just need to confirm one small detail regarding the bride's name." At the time, I thought it was just a simple mistake. I had no idea that the wedding I had spent a year planning was already slipping quietly out of my hands. There's a moment in many families when childhood quietly ends, not with a celebration, not with a birthday, but with responsibility. For me, that moment came when I was 17. Before that, life in our house had been normal enough. My parents argued sometimes, like most parents do, but they still laughed at dinner. We still went on small family trips. Madison and I still shared a bathroom and fought over the mirror in the mornings. The ordinary things, the kind of life you assume will always stay the same, until one evening it didn't. I still remember the sound of the front door closing, not slamming, just closing. My father walked out of the house carrying one suitcase, and that was it. No long explanation, no dramatic goodbye. Just a quiet sentence spoken to my mother in the kitchen that Madison and I weren't supposed to hear. "I can't do this anymore." The next morning, he was gone, and somehow, everything became my responsibility. My mother worked long hours after that. 2 jobs, sometimes 3. Bills needed to be paid. The house needed to be kept running. And Madison, well, Madison was only 14, still young enough to believe someone would fix everything. That someone became me. I started working evenings at a small grocery store after school, not because anyone asked me to, but because I could see the stress on my mother's face when she opened envelopes from the bank. I helped Madison with her homework, made dinner most nights, drove her to activities once I got my license. It wasn't heroic. It wasn't tragic. It was just what needed to happen. And somewhere along the way, the roles inside our family quietly shifted. My mother became exhausted. Madison remained the youngest, and I became something else. Not quite a daughter, not quite a parent, something in between. Madison handled the divorce differently. She cried more. She got frustrated more easily. She needed attention. Teachers noticed. Friends noticed. My mother noticed. And because Madison seemed fragile, everyone tried a little harder to protect her, which meant that when something went wrong, people looked to me to smooth things over. If Madison forgot an assignment, I helped her finish it. If she fought with friends, I helped her talk it out. If she broke something, I quietly replaced it. It became a pattern, one that no one questioned, not even me, because in my mind, helping Madison meant helping the family, and helping the family meant everything would eventually be okay. By the time I was 22, the habit had become automatic. Madison needed help paying tuition for her final semester. I lent her the money. She lost her first job and needed rent. I covered it. She crashed her car and needed help with repairs. I handled it, not because she demanded it, not exactly, but because she always seemed so sure that I would, and most of the time, she was right. When people depend on you long enough, it becomes part of who you are. You stop asking whether you should help. You just help. By the time I met Mark, I was already used to being the responsible one, the dependable one, the calm one. Our first real conversation happened 2 weeks after the coffee incident. We were sitting outside the same cafe where we met. A warm evening, quiet street. The kind of moment where time slows down a little. He asked about my family, and I told him the simplified version. My parents divorced when I was 17. I helped take care of things. He nodded thoughtfully. Then he asked something no one had ever asked before. "And who took care of you?" I laughed, not because it was funny, because I genuinely didn't know how to answer. Mark noticed that. He didn't push the question. But from that moment on, he started noticing small things, like how I instinctively said yes whenever Madison called, or how I apologized when plans changed, even when the change wasn't my fault. One evening, after Madison canceled dinner with us for the 3rd time in a month because she needed help with something, Mark looked at me and said quietly, "You know, you're allowed to say no sometimes." I shrugged. It's just easier to help. He studied me for a moment. Then, he said something simple. Easy for who? I didn't answer, because I had never thought about that before. When Mark proposed, the first thing we did together was visit the venue, the garden by the lake. We arrived in late afternoon. Golden sunlight filtered through tall maple branches. The water behind the ceremony arch was so still it looked like glass. There were soft stone paths winding through the property, and an old wooden dock that stretched out into the lake. It was peaceful, quiet, the kind of place where you could imagine the world slowing down for a few hours. Mark squeezed my hand as we walked through the garden. "You look happy," he said. "I am." And for once, it was true without hesitation. Planning the wedding felt different from planning events for clients. This time I wasn't fixing someone else's problems. I was creating something for myself, for us. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to imagine a future where my life wasn't defined by responsibility. Just love, just partnership, just peace. A few months later, we had dinner at my mother's house. Nothing special, just the usual family gathering. Madison arrived late. As usual, dropping her purse onto the chair dramatically. Traffic was terrible, she announced. Then she noticed the wedding planning binder on the table. "Oh, right," she said. "Wedding stuff." She flipped through a few pages while eating. Pictures of the venue, decoration layouts, guest lists. After a moment, she leaned back in her chair. "You're really doing the whole fairy tale thing." "Huh," I smiled. "Not exactly fairy tale. Just simple." Madison looked around the table. Then she laughed softly. "Emily always gets everything." The room went quiet. I frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" She shrugged. "You've got the career, the nice apartment, the perfect fiancé." She gestured toward the binder. "And now, the dream wedding." She looked down at her plate. "I don't even know what I'm doing with my life yet." My mother immediately reached over and touched her arm. "Oh, honey." Madison forced a small smile. "It's fine. I'm happy for her." But the way she said it didn't quite match the words. The room felt tense, and because I had spent my entire life fixing tension, I did what I always did. I tried to make things easier. "Well," I said gently, "you could use the venue for your engagement party someday." Madison looked up immediately. "Really?" "Of course. It's a big space. We're not even using the whole garden." Her smile returned instantly. "Emily, that would be amazing." My mother looked relieved. "See," she said warmly. "This is what family is for." Everyone relaxed again. Conversation returned to normal. Dinner continued. But as we were leaving later that night, Mark quietly asked me something. "Did you mean that?" I shrugged. "It's just a party. The venue can handle it." He nodded slowly, but he didn't look convinced. That night, after Madison left and the house was quiet, I sat alone at the kitchen table. The wedding binder was open in front of me. Pictures of the lake, the ceremony arch, the long tables beneath the trees. I stared at them for a long time, and then I told myself something I had believed my entire life. Family comes first. Always. Helping Madison had never truly hurt me before, so letting her use the venue for a party someday, that seemed harmless. I closed the binder and smiled to myself. Everything would work out. It always did. What I didn't realize was that Madison had heard something very different in that conversation. I had offered her the venue for a party, but in Madison's mind, I had just given her something much bigger, something she had already decided she deserved. And a few months later, she would take it. The phone call came on a Tuesday afternoon. I remember the exact moment because I was standing in the middle of a hotel ballroom, measuring the distance between two tables. Corporate event. 600 guests. The kind of event where every chair has to line up perfectly or someone complains. My phone vibrated in my pocket. Normally I ignore calls while working, but when I saw the name on the screen, I paused. "Mr. Carter Lakeside Garden Venue. The manager. He rarely called unless something needed confirmation. I stepped away from the ballroom and answered, "Hi, Mr. Carter." His voice sounded polite, professional, calm. "Hello, Emily. I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "Not at all." "What's going on?" There was a small pause. "Nothing serious." He said, "We just need to confirm a small detail regarding the contract." "Sure." "It concerns the bride's name listed for the ceremony." I frowned slightly. "The bride's name?" "Yes." Another pause. "Currently, the contract lists Madison Carter." For a moment, I thought I had misheard him. "I'm sorry." "What?" "The bride's name was updated yesterday through our administrative portal." He sounded slightly confused now. "We simply wanted to verify that the change was intentional." The hallway suddenly felt very quiet. "My wedding is booked under Emily Carter." I said slowly, "Yes." He replied gently, "That's what the original contract states," which is why we were surprised by the update. I leaned against the wall. "Who made the change?" "Your sister." Another pause. "She said you had transferred the event to her." The words hung in the air for several seconds. "Transferred?" I blinked slowly. "No." I said, "I didn't transfer anything." "Mr. Carter hesitated. "Oh." Then his tone shifted, slightly professional, but cautious. "She seemed quite certain. She also mentioned that your family had already approved the change." For a moment, I couldn't find any words. Not anger, not confusion, just a strange, quiet disbelief. Finally, I said, "I'll come by this afternoon." "Of course," he replied. "We'll sort everything out." The venue was about 40 minutes outside the city. Normally, I enjoyed the drive. The road wound through quiet neighborhoods and small forests, but that afternoon, the entire trip felt unreal. Madison must have misunderstood. That was the only explanation. Maybe she thought the engagement party idea meant she could access the planning portal. Maybe she accidentally edited something. There had to be a simple explanation. Madison could be impulsive sometimes, but she wouldn't actually try to take my wedding. Right. I repeated that thought several times during the drive. Each time, it sounded a little less convincing. When I arrived, the garden looked exactly the way it always did. Quiet, peaceful, sunlight reflecting off the lake. Mr. Carter greeted me at the entrance with a polite smile, but I noticed the slight tension in his posture. "Thank you for coming." "Emily." "Of course." We walked toward the office near the main hall. "Your sister stopped by yesterday," he explained. "She had access to the planning portal through your shared account." That made sense. When Madison asked questions about the venue months earlier, I had shown her the planning dashboard, decoration previews, guest capacity, scheduling tools. I never imagined she would actually change anything. Inside the office, Mr. Carter turned the monitor toward me. There it was, the contract page, Bride Madison Carter. Everything else remained the same. Same date, same venue, same payment schedule, same responsibilities, just a different bride. I stared at the screen. How is this possible? He cleared his throat. Well, technically the account owner can update event details. As long as the financial responsibility remains attached to the original contract holder, I felt a small chill run through me. Financial responsibility. I filed that phrase away in the back of my mind. But before I could say anything else, the office door opened, and Madison walked in. She looked completely relaxed, like someone arriving early to a party. "Hey," she said cheerfully. "Good. You're here." I turned toward her slowly. "Madison." She glanced at the computer screen. "Oh, good," she said. "You saw the update." The calmness in her voice felt surreal. "You changed my wedding contract." She shrugged. "Well, technically I updated the bride name. That's the same thing." Mr. Carter quietly excused himself from the room. "Why?" I asked. Madison leaned against the desk. "Because it makes more sense." I blinked. More sense. Yeah. She said it like she was explaining a minor scheduling adjustment. You don't even like big weddings that much. That's not true. She waved a hand dismissively. You only booked the big venue because of your job. That's what event planners do. I stared at her. Madison, this is my wedding. She said, Emily. Her tone shifted slightly. The same tone she used when I was being unreasonable about something small. You always say family comes first. I felt something tighten in my chest. This isn't about family. Yes, it is. She gestured toward the garden outside the window. You already have everything. Your career, your perfect fiancé, your organized little life. Her voice softened slightly. I've been struggling for years. And now Daniel and I finally have a chance to start something good. My mind felt strangely slow. You're getting married too. She nodded. Next month. I blinked. Next month? We decided quickly. Of course she did. Madison had always made decisions quickly, and other people usually cleaned up the details later. You can find another venue. She continued casually. You work in events. You know how to do that stuff. The way she said it made something inside me shift. Slowly, quietly, like a door beginning to close. You're serious? Of course I'm serious. Then she smiled. Besides, you already said I could use the venue. I remembered the dinner, the engagement party comment, the casual promise. You misunderstood. No, Madison said gently. I understood perfectly. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she added softly, you always understand. Emily. And there it was again. The rule, the one my family had followed my entire life. Emily will understand. Madison waited patiently, confident, certain, like someone who had already won the argument. A few seconds later, the office door opened again. This time it was my mother. She stepped inside and immediately looked between us. Oh, good, she said. You're both here. She turned to me with that same calm expression she always used during family disagreements. Emily. Sweetheart. Madison explained everything. I looked at her slowly, and she hesitated for only a moment. Then she said the words I should have expected. It would mean so much to your sister if she could use the garden. The room fell silent. Madison watched me. My mother waited. And somewhere in the distance, outside, I could hear the wind moving through the maple trees by the lake. Everyone in that room already knew what they expected me to say, because my entire life had trained them to expect it. Emily will understand. And for a moment, I almost did. Almost. But something inside me had begun to change. Quietly. Slowly, like a realization forming just beneath the surface. And it would only take one more sentence to decide what happened next. The room felt strangely calm, not tense, not explosive, just expectant, like everyone was waiting for the most predictable thing in the world to happen. Madison leaned casually against the desk. My mother stood beside her, hands gently folded together, both of them looking at me the same way they always had, patient, certain, waiting for Emily to understand. For years, that expectation had been enough to decide everything. But this time, something inside me felt different. Not anger, not revenge, just clarity. I looked at Madison. You're asking me to give you my wedding. She shrugged. You weren't using it yet. It's scheduled in 6 weeks. You can move it. Her confidence was effortless. That was the strange part. She truly believed this was reasonable. My mother stepped forward slightly. Emily, she said softly, your sister is under a lot of pressure. I looked at her, and I'm not. She hesitated. You're stronger. That answer landed harder than she probably intended, because it wasn't praise. It was justification. Madison crossed her arms. Look, Emily, you always say family comes first. I do. Then why is this suddenly a problem? I thought about that question for a moment, not because I didn't know the answer, but because saying the answer out loud would change something permanent. So instead, I asked a different question. When were you planning to tell me? Madison frowned slightly. Well, you're here now. That wasn't my question. Another small pause. I assumed Mom would talk to you. My mother looked slightly uncomfortable but didn't deny it. Of course, they had planned to explain later, after everything was already arranged, after it was too late to argue. The familiar pattern again. Decisions first. Emily will understand later. Something strange happened in that moment. The anger I expected to feel never arrived. Instead, there was a quiet realization. I suddenly understood something about my family. Not something cruel, not something evil, just something simple. They didn't believe they were hurting me, because they believed I would always recover. Emily is strong. Emily is capable. Emily will figure it out, which meant every sacrifice felt safe. Safe for them, because the cost was never theirs. It was always mine. Madison shifted impatiently. So what? So are we doing this or not? Her tone had sharpened slightly. Not angry, just annoyed, like someone waiting for a delayed flight announcement. Mark's voice echoed quietly in my memory. You're allowed to say no sometimes. I exhaled slowly. Then I turned toward Mr. Carter, who had been politely pretending not to hear most of the conversation. Mr. Carter, I said calmly. Yes, if the bride name changes, does the contract still stand? He nodded. Yes, and the responsibilities, they remain with the contract holder unless formally transferred. I thought about that. Then I asked one more question. If the event proceeds under Madison's name, everything else stays the same. He hesitated. Yes. Madison smiled immediately. Perfect. She looked at me expectantly. My mother watched carefully, waiting, and for the first time in my life, I decided not to fight, not to argue, not to explain. I simply nodded. If Madison wants the venue, I said quietly, she can have it. The relief in the room was instant. My mother smiled. Madison laughed lightly. I knew you'd understand. Of course she did. They both did, because I always had. Madison grabbed her phone and started talking excitedly. Oh my God. Daniel's going to love this. We can keep the lake ceremony and everything. She was already planning, already imagining the wedding, already celebrating the victory. None of them noticed the way Mr. Carter looked at me. A subtle glance, a question in his eyes. I gave him the smallest nod. He seemed to understand. I walked outside while Madison and my mother continued discussing decorations. The air near the lake was cool and quiet. The water reflected the trees like a mirror. For months I had imagined walking down the aisle here, Mark waiting near the arch, music drifting through the garden, but now that image felt distant, like a story that had already ended. A few minutes later, Mark's car pulled into the gravel parking lot. He stepped out and walked toward me. I could see the concern on his face immediately. What happened? I looked at the lake for a moment before answering. Madison's getting married here. He blinked. What? She changed the contract. And your mom just agreed to that? Yes. And you? I agreed too. For a second, he just stared at me. You agreed? Yes. He looked genuinely confused. Emily. Why? I turned toward him. Because they expected me to fight. And if you don't, then the story changes. He studied my face carefully, like he was trying to understand something deeper. What aren't you telling me? I held up the contract folder, the venue agreement. So I read it. Of course you did. Very carefully. His eyes narrowed slightly, and slowly, he began to smile. Emily, he said quietly, what's in that contract? I looked back toward the garden. Madison's laughter drifted faintly through the trees. Then I answered, something my sister definitely didn't read. Mark folded his arms. And what happens next? I closed the folder. That depends. On what? On how badly Madison wants this wedding. He tilted his head slightly. I think she wants it very badly. Yes, I said softly. I think so too. Inside the venue, Madison was still excitedly discussing decorations. My mother was helping her review the seating layout, the same seating chart I had created. The same floral arrangements. The same ceremony timeline. Everything remained exactly the way I designed it, just with a different bride. When Mr. Carter noticed me return, he stepped aside with me briefly. "Are you certain about this decision?" "Yes. Your sister may not understand the full terms." "I know." He studied me carefully. "You could still stop this." "I could, and you're choosing not to." "Yes." There was a long pause. Finally, he nodded slowly. "Very well." He printed a short document and placed it on the desk. "Just confirm that Madison will be the acting event host." Madison signed instantly, barely reading a line. Of course she didn't. Why would she? She had already won. Or at least, that's what she believed. As we left the venue, later that afternoon, Madison hugged me quickly. "Thank you for being cool about this." My mother smiled warmly. "I told you Emily would understand." I smiled back, not sarcastically, not bitterly, just calmly, because for the first time, they were wrong about what I understood, and they were about to learn something they had never expected. What happens when Emily stops fixing things? 2 weeks passed quietly, too quietly. Life returned to something that almost looked normal. Almost. At work, I continued planning events for clients. Seating charts. Vendor calls. Floral deliveries. On the surface, nothing had changed. But inside my family, everything had shifted. Madison had fully taken control of the wedding, and she was enjoying every second of it. I heard about most of the updates through my mother. Not because I asked, because my mother called almost every evening to tell me, "Madison picked the lavender centerpieces. Daniel's family is inviting more guests. They're adding a live band now." Each conversation sounded like a celebration, like the wedding had always belonged to Madison. Sometimes my mother spoke carefully, like she was trying to avoid hurting me. Other times she sounded completely comfortable with the new reality. "Emily, you're so good for letting your sister have this. You've always been the generous one." I never argued. I simply listened, because arguing wouldn't change anything, and because something else was quietly approaching, something Madison hadn't noticed yet. One evening, Mark and I were sitting on our apartment balcony. The sun had just started to set. The sky above the city was turning soft shades of orange and violet. He leaned back in his chair and looked at me. "You're very calm." I smiled slightly. "Is that surprising?" "Yes." "You expected revenge?" "No." He thought for a moment. "I expected anger." "I was angry." "Past tense." "Yes." He studied me carefully. "Then what changed?" I looked out across the skyline. I realized something. "What?" "Madison didn't steal my wedding." He frowned. "She didn't." "No. She took something she thought she wanted. And sometimes people don't understand the full cost of what they take." Mark nodded slowly. "So the contract?" "Yes." He leaned forward slightly. "What exactly is in that contract?" I picked up the folder beside my chair. Even now, the paper felt familiar in my hands. Venue maintenance fees, insurance, staffing costs, security, garden preservation, full event liability. I looked up at him. "All payable before the ceremony." His eyebrows rose slightly. "How much?" I turned the folder so he could see the number highlighted on the final page. Mark stared for a moment. Then he let out a quiet breath. "Wow." "Yes. And Madison doesn't know about this." "Not yet." He leaned back slowly. "What happens when she finds out?" I looked toward the fading sunset. "She'll call me." It happened exactly 2 weeks after Madison signed the document. A quiet Wednesday morning. Madison was at a small cafe downtown with her fiancé Daniel. They were discussing guest lists and honeymoon plans. Everything was going perfectly, at least until her phone buzzed. An email notification from the venue. She opened it casually, probably expecting something simple. Decoration confirmations, scheduling reminders, but instead, there was a single message. Final invoice confirmation. Attached below. Madison tapped the file. The document loaded slowly on her screen. Daniel kept talking about travel packages while she scrolled through the page. Then she stopped. At the bottom of the document was a number, a very large number. 70元. Ling. For several seconds, Madison just stared at it. Daniel noticed her silence. What's wrong? She blinked. Nothing. But her voice sounded thin. She read the document again. Garden preservation fees, event insurance, exclusive venue use, staffing deposits, final event balance. Everything clearly listed, everything legally binding, and everything due before the ceremony. Madison swallowed slowly. That can't be right. She quickly searched the document for my name. There it was. Contract holder, Emily Carter. But below it, event host, Madison Carter. Responsible party for final event execution. Madison's hands started to shake slightly. She scrolled back to the total again. 70元. Ling. Her heart began beating faster. That's insane, she whispered. Daniel leaned over to look. What is it? She turned the phone toward him. He read the number. Then his expression changed. That's not a deposit. No. What is it? Madison's voice trembled. I think it's the full cost. Daniel stared at her. You didn't know about this. She shook her head. No. Didn't Emily explain it? Madison grabbed her phone. I'm calling her. My phone rang while I was organizing inventory at work. I didn't need to look at the screen. I already knew who it was. Madison. I answered calmly. Hey. Her voice came through immediately. Emily. Not cheerful, not confident. Sharp. What is this invoice? I leaned against the desk. What invoice? The venue just sent me a bill for $78,000. Yes. Yes, what? That sounds correct. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. You're joking. No. Emily. You need to call them and fix this. Fix what? The bill. Why would I fix it? Because it's your venue. I shook my head slightly. No. It's yours. Silence. Then Madison's voice rose slightly. You're the one who booked it. Yes. But you're the one using it. You said I could have it. I did. You didn't say anything about this. I opened the contract folder again. Page 12. The clause. I assumed you read the agreement. You know, I didn't read the whole thing. That's usually a good idea before signing something. Madison's breathing sounded faster now. Emily. We can't pay $78,000. I know. Then you need to take the venue back. I closed my eyes briefly. There it was. The rescue request. The moment Madison expected everything to return to normal. Emily will fix it. Emily always fixes it. But this time, I didn't. You chose the venue. I said gently, Madison, this is your wedding. Another long silence. Then she whispered, You're serious? Yes. You're really not going to help me. For a moment, I felt the old instinct rising again. The familiar pull, the urge to solve the problem. But I remembered the garden, the sign with her name, the way everyone expected me to disappear quietly. And the feeling passed. I hope the wedding goes beautifully. I said softly. Then I hung up. Within an hour, my phone exploded with calls. Madison, my mother, even Daniel once. Voicemails, messages, questions, anger, confusion. But none of them changed the reality. Madison had taken the venue, and now the venue came with a price. For the first time in my life, I had stepped back from fixing the problem, and the entire family suddenly realized something they had never considered before. Emily wasn't rescuing anyone. Not this time. The morning of the wedding arrived quietly. Clear sky. Soft wind moving through the maple trees. The lake perfectly still. It was the kind of peaceful morning that makes everything feel important, significant, permanent. The garden looked beautiful, exactly the way I had designed it months ago. White roses wrapped around the wooden arch, rows of chairs, perfectly aligned across the grass, soft lanterns hanging from the tree branches above the reception tables, everything in its place, every detail carefully planned, just like I always did. Except today, I wasn't the bride. Madison was. Inside the venue office, Mr. Carter sat behind his desk, reviewing paperwork. He looked calm, but there was tension in his expression. He had seen many weddings before. He understood when something wasn't quite right. Madison and Daniel stood in front of the desk. My mother hovered nearby, all of them looking anxious. Mr. Carter folded his hands. "I'm sorry," he said politely, "but the final payment deadline passed at 9 this morning." Madison's voice trembled slightly. "We're working on it. The contract requires payment before the ceremony begins." Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "Can't we handle it afterward?" Mr. Carter shook his head. "I'm afraid that isn't possible." The room fell silent. My mother glanced nervously at Madison, then at the door, like she was waiting for someone, waiting for me. Because even after everything that had happened, a part of them still believed I would appear and solve the problem. Emily always fixes things. That belief had survived decades. It was difficult for them to imagine a different ending. Outside, guests began arriving along the stone path. Soft music drifted across the garden. Conversations and laughter filled the warm afternoon air. Most of them had no idea what was happening inside the office. They were simply attending a wedding. The wedding Madison had dreamed about. The wedding she believed she deserved. But inside the office, the situation was becoming impossible to ignore. Madison's phone buzzed constantly with messages from friends and bridesmaids. "Where are you? Are we starting soon?" Guests are asking questions. Daniel looked at Mr. Carter again. "There has to be something we can do." "There is." Everyone turned toward the door. Because that voice was mine. I stepped into the office slowly. Mark walked beside me. Madison froze when she saw us. For a moment, no one spoke. My mother looked relieved, almost emotional. "Emily." Madison's shoulders dropped slightly, like someone who had been holding their breath. "You came." "Yes." She swallowed. "Did you bring the payment?" The room became completely silent. Even the faint music outside seemed to fade. Everyone watching, waiting, expecting. I stepped closer to the desk. Then I looked directly at Madison. "No." Her face went pale. "No." For several seconds, no one moved. Madison's voice cracked. "Then why are you here?" I looked around the office slowly. At my mother, at Daniel, at Mr. Carter, then back at Madison. Because this was supposed to be my wedding. The words landed softly, but their meaning filled the room. Madison's eyes dropped to the floor. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. My mother said nothing. I continued gently. "You took the venue. You changed the contract. You planned the entire wedding without asking me once." Madison whispered. "I said I was sorry." "No." I replied quietly. "You said I would understand." She looked up again, tears forming in her eyes. "Emily, please." I shook my head slightly. "You know what the hardest part was?" She didn't answer. "It wasn't losing the wedding. It was realizing that none of you believed I mattered enough to ask." The room felt heavy now. Not angry, just honest. Mr. Carter cleared his throat quietly. "Miss Carter, I still need to confirm whether the ceremony will proceed." I looked at him, then at Madison. "The ceremony can happen." Everyone froze. Madison blinked. "What?" "The venue is still available." "But the payment?" "I didn't say I would pay it." Her confusion deepened. "Then how?" "You'll pay it." Madison stared at me like she had misheard. "I told you already." She whispered. "I can't." I nodded. "I know." "So, what are you saying?" I held her gaze. "I'm saying the wedding can happen, if you're ready to accept the responsibility that comes with it." Madison's breathing quickened. "That's impossible." "No. It's the contract you signed." Her voice broke slightly. "You knew I couldn't afford this." "Yes." "Then why didn't you warn me?" I paused. Because the answer was simple, but important. Because no one warned me when you took my wedding. The silence that followed felt enormous. Madison finally looked away. Daniel stepped closer to her. "Madison." His voice was gentle. "We can postpone." She shook her head immediately. "No. But, no." Her voice steadied slightly. "I'm not canceling this wedding." She looked back at me, tears still visible, but something else too. Pride, determination. "If this is the price," she swallowed, "then I'll find a way to pay it." Mr. Carter nodded slowly. "Very well." He turned the payment terminal toward her. Madison took a long breath, then reached for her card. Daniel placed his hand over hers. "We'll figure it out together." For the first time all day, I saw something different in Madison's expression. Not entitlement, not certainty, just reality, and maybe growth. Madison completed the payment. The screen confirmed the transaction. 70,000 yuan. Ling Ling, a number that would follow them for years. But the ceremony could proceed. Madison wiped her eyes and turned toward the door. Guests were waiting. The music began again outside. As she walked past me, she paused. For a moment, she looked like she might say something. Finally, she whispered, "I didn't think it would hurt you this much." I answered honestly, "It didn't." She looked confused. "Then why?" "Because you needed to learn something." "What?" I held her gaze. "That choices have weight." Madison nodded slowly. Then, she walked outside, toward the garden, toward the wedding she had fought to keep. And this time, the responsibility belonged to her. Mark and I stood near the back of the garden as the ceremony began. Guests filled the chairs. The lake shimmered behind the arch. Madison walked down the aisle in the same white dress I had seen weeks earlier. But something about her posture had changed. Less confidence, more awareness. The ceremony was simple, beautiful, quiet. Exactly the kind of wedding I had originally planned. Mark squeezed my hand gently. "You okay?" I nodded. "Yes." And I meant it, because the garden by the lake no longer felt like something stolen. It felt like something finished, a chapter that had finally closed. A month later, Mark and I stood beside another lake. This one was smaller, quieter. There were no grand stone paths or historic gardens, just a wooden dock, a few rows of chairs, and a wide stretch of calm water reflecting the afternoon sky. The ceremony arch was simple, white fabric and wildflowers tied gently around two wooden posts. No elaborate decorations, no hundreds of guests, just people who genuinely wanted to be there. And for the first time in the entire wedding journey, everything felt light. When I planned my original wedding at the big venue, I had spent months perfecting every detail, the exact shade of flowers, the exact spacing between tables, the exact lighting across the trees. Everything had been controlled. Everything had been designed. But now, standing beside this quiet lake, I realized something. This wedding didn't need perfection. It just needed honesty. Mark stood beside me, adjusting his jacket nervously. "Are you sure this is okay?" he asked quietly. "Okay." He smiled slightly. "I mean, after everything that happened." I looked around the small gathering. 20 guests, a few close friends, 2 of Mark's cousins, and near the back, my mother, standing quietly beside a row of chairs. "Yes," I said softly, "it's more than okay." The water behind the ceremony arch moved gently with the breeze. I found myself staring at it, because lakes had quietly followed this entire story. The first garden venue had been built beside a lake, the place where Madison got married, the place where everything changed. Back then, the lake had reflected something different: expectation, pressure, the weight of responsibility. But this lake felt calmer, not because it was more beautiful, but because the meaning had changed. The first lake had been about the wedding everyone expected me to have. This one was simply about the life Mark and I were building together. A week before our ceremony, Madison had called me, not about money, not about the venue, just to talk. Her voice sounded different, quieter. "Hey," she said. "Hey." There was a long pause. I wanted to say something. I waited. "I'm sorry." The word hung in the air. Simple, but sincere. "I should have asked," she said. Yes, I didn't think about how it would feel for you. I know. Another pause. Then she added softly, "Turns out weddings are really expensive." I laughed gently. Yeah. Daniel had apparently helped her set up a payment plan with the venue. It would take years to fully repay the cost. But Madison wasn't asking me to fix it anymore. She was just handling it. And strangely enough, that made me respect her more than I had in a long time. My mother approached me just before the ceremony began. She looked nervous, like someone about to admit something difficult. "Emily." "Hi." "Mom." She glanced around at the small gathering. "This is beautiful. Thank you." Another pause. Then she said something I had waited years to hear. "I should have asked you." The words came slowly. "I should have asked before supporting Madison." "Yes," I said quietly. "I know." She looked down at the ground. "I always believed you were strong enough to handle things." "That's what everyone said." "I thought I was complimenting you." "You were. But it also meant you carried more than anyone else." She nodded. "I see that now." The apology wasn't dramatic. There were no tears. But it was honest, and sometimes honesty is enough. The ceremony itself was simple. The officiant was a friend of Mark's. The wind carried the faint smell of water and wildflowers across the dock. When I walked down the short aisle, Mark looked at me with the same calm smile he had worn the day he proposed. The same smile he had worn during every difficult moment of the past month. When we reached the dock, he whispered softly, "This one feels right." I nodded. Yes, because this wedding wasn't about proving anything, not to my family, not to Madison, not even to myself. It was simply about choosing a life together, and that choice felt lighter than anything I had carried before. Mark spoke first. "I promise," he said quietly, "to build a life where we take care of each other, not just when it's easy, but especially when it's not." I smiled, because those words reminded me of the question he asked years earlier. Who takes care of you? Now I knew the answer. We would, together, when it was my turn to speak. I said something simple. For most of my life, I believed love meant giving everything. But now I know love also means letting someone stand beside you and share the weight. Mark squeezed my hands, and in that moment, I felt something shift again. Not loss, not anger, just peace. After the ceremony ended, guests gathered along the dock. The sun began setting across the water, golden light stretching across the surface of the lake. Mark slipped his arm around my shoulders. "You know," he said, "this lake is nicer than the first one." I laughed. Objectively, no. Emotionally. I looked across the calm water, and I realized he was right. Because the first lake had represented something else entirely. Expectation. Sacrifice. A life where I always stepped aside. But this lake was different. This lake represented something new. Balance. Choice. Respect. And the quiet understanding that love doesn't mean disappearing for someone else. It means standing beside them. Later that evening, as the guests began leaving and the sky turned deep blue above the water, I stood alone at the edge of the dock for a moment. The lake was still, peaceful, and I thought about everything that had happened. Madison taking the venue, the contract, the arguments, the realization that my family had expected me to bend forever. But I also thought about something else. Growth. Madison learning responsibility. My mother learning to listen. And me learning that boundaries don't destroy relationships. They reveal which ones can survive honesty. Mark walked up beside me, ready to go. I nodded. Yes. As we walked back toward the lights of the small reception area, I glanced once more at the lake. Then I smiled. Because sometimes family isn't just the people who stand beside you when things are easy. Sometimes family is the people who learn to respect you. When you finally learn to respect yourself. Thank you so much for listening all the way to the end of my story. If you have any thoughts or suggestions, feel free to leave them in the comments below so I can keep improving. I truly appreciate your support.